Coming up on the Razzball Fantasy Football podcast, we discuss the must-have tight end streamers that can win you a fantasy title. That's right, top streamers in week 15, 16, and 17, all the way to your title, starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And you're not confused, folks. I know everyone's thinking, is it Friday already? No, it's Thursday. That is Ben Wadley, though. All right. And I know this is going to confuse and I apologize because if you think it's Friday and then it's only Thursday, that's kind of a bad thing. So we're starting off the podcast on a low note, and I apologize, even though it's Friday for you. We know, Ben.
I was about to say, it is Friday. I'm really confused now.
We get it. Friday. You're in Australia. Okay. We get it. All right. You're ahead of us on the timeline. All good. Ben, what's going on, man? We're excited to have you today to talk must-have tight ends. First, I want to get your thoughts, though. Tonight's game is kind of I don't want to say a dud, but is there anything you're looking for? Anybody you're starting in tonight's game? Raiders, Chargers, no Justin Herbert, and Aiden O'Connell leading the pack again.
Gosh, it's not pretty, is it? Look, for me, Devontae Adams, wide receiver 2, you can start him. Austin Eckler, you got to start him. He's an RB1 for me. I'm starting him above most people. Realistically, DSTs maybe, Raiders DST, maybe even Chargers DST. I think they're okay streamers, but for the most part, I'm avoiding these guys. Zamir White's the only other guy you'd really consider. He's more of a flex option, but I don't even like him as much as Ty Chandler. Like, there's a lot of other guys I'd rather start over him. So when you're in the fantasy playoffs, you don't want to risk it. So let's talk about some guys you actually can start.
All right, I like that. Today, unfortunately, folks, if anybody was getting excited for some slot versus wide, we are talking must-have tight ends today, folks. But that's going to be a good show. And we're bringing on another guy here, Jefferson 23. 21. I don't know why I said 23. That's a whole problem. Jefferson 20. We fired Jefferson 23 a long time ago. My apologies. This guy right here, Jeff, was on the show Sunday. He wanted to come back for more. You can go follow him on Twitter at Jefferson_21, and you go check out his article on Razzball. The takeaways every Monday. What's going on, Jeff?
I'm doing well. How about y'all? Looking forward to this one.
Now, Jeff, Ben has basically said, don't do anything in this game other than start Eckler and Adams. You have the same sentiment. Zamir White kind of interest you at all in this matchup? What's your thoughts about the Raiders-Chargers?
I'm not going to look for Zamir White in this one. I am, though, going to go with the Raiders defense. As a streamer defense pick, I'm starting them. I think Max Crosby is going to have a big game with Mac. I think they're going to get like 5-6 sacks, hopefully. They held the Vikings to only 3. I don't see why they can't do it again against the Chargers without Keenan Allen. So taking a chance early on. Sometimes you got to have some volatility and some risk, and I'm willing to do it here for a defense.
You know what? No risk it, no biscuit. All right. A great man once said that. His name is Bruce Arians, folks. If you're not willing to stick your neck out for a fantasy title, what are you even doing here, folks? So I like that a lot. So today's episode, we're here to break down. If you haven't been checking out our series so far, we've been doing must-have tight ends, essentially talking through every single week, every streamer, everything you need to know heading into your fantasy playoffs. We've done must-have handcuffs. We've done must-have defense. We've done quarterbacks. Now we're doing tight ends this week, and we're going to kind of help guide you. Let's say, for example, you've been streaming tight ends all year. It's been kind of hit or miss. We're here to break down how you can get through your fantasy championships, with streamer tight ends. Also, which is also just important, should you start your studs? Today's show is really kind of identify some of those top guys, the guys that we personally think are must-start tight ends. Now, I'm going to throw out a short list of guys who I feel like you have to start because it's the fantasy playoffs. You don't want to mess around. And I know the Kittles, the Kelseys, the Hawkinsons are all going to be there. Mark Andrews would have been there if he was healthy. But there's some guys that kind of emerged over the last month, maybe even the last half season. Guys like Sam Laporta, Evan Ingram really stand out to me. Now, I guess that's kind of my short list of guys. So Evan Ingram, really after the Cleveland game, you cannot sit him. No Christian Kirk. He's become basically their slot guy. I'm not touching Evan Ingram. He's locked in for me. Sam Laporta as well, if you have him. But outside of that, it's like Dallas Goedert is healthy and back too. So I would say Goddard as well. But there's some guys like Jake Ferguson, for example, maybe even a Dalton Schultz, maybe a David Njoku, maybe a Trey McBride. Now, Ben, your thoughts on this list? Are you going to expand your must-starts to those kind of tight ends, or are you going to start looking at matchups when you start getting to the low-end tight end one tier?
So for me with tight ends, there's a couple of things you need to look at. The first is route participation. How often are they actually running a route? You're looking for at least 30 routes a game or a really high target share. That means they're at least going to be involved. The second thing you're looking at is how often do they actually get targets? So that's where you take out guys like Cade Otton, who runs 40 routes a game, but they're mostly pretty empty. And then you need to start looking at matchups after that. So for those first two things, that kind of narrows it down to 10 guys for me that you're starting every week. There's the obvious guys you already mentioned, like Kelsey, Hawkinson, Laporta, Kittle, and Ingram as well. I'd also add Trey McBride to that list. I'd add David Njoku. I'm using Jake Ferguson every week. And with Mark Andrews out, I'd even start Isaiah Likely pretty much every single week, certainly every week of the playoffs. And I think even though Dawson Knox came back, Dalton Kincaid, assuming he's healthy, is also an every week starter. I wouldn't, however, include Dallas Goedert. I think we need to see a little bit more from him just to make sure he's actually going to be heavily involved. So there are a couple of streamers that I would start over him this week.
Jeff, your thoughts on that list from Ben? Are you looking to add, drop anybody off? What's your thoughts?
Oh, no, I share the same sentiments. I think Ingram is going to end up being tight end 1 for the fantasy playoffs. That's a bold call there. With Kirk being out, they're going to have to pass a lot just for the playoff push for Jacksonville. He's gotten 9 and 12 targets back-to-back games with Kirk out. I love the volume there. And Trevor threw 50 times against Cleveland, so maybe that's a trend. They're going to pass more for Jacksonville. And then the second player I really like a lot is Trey McBride. Since Kyler Murray returned from the IR, he's getting approximately 9 targets a game. From Murray, I know they had a tough matchup against San Francisco, but since that stretch in week 10, he's been tight end 5, and that's with the bye week being included in that stretch. So for total points. So I really like McBride as well.
Yeah, when I'm looking at this too, like the guy Goddard has a really tough matchup according to our metric in week 16. So this week 15 is going to be his period where we got to see if he's going to play well or not. But it's going to be tough to get away from Dallas Goedert. I mean, he's been good all year. I know he's coming back from injuries, but we can make the same argument. The first game Dawson Knox comes back, Dalton Kincaid does not produce. That's a red flag because he didn't produce with Dawson Knox on the field for most of the first half of the season. So I am a little more concerned about those fringe tight end 1 guys that have been more, I would love to see a healthy Dallas Goedert, and I would love Dawson Knox just to take a break. Hey, just relax out there, Dawson. No need to get all worked up and start playing football again. But unfortunately, he's out there. We'll see. But let's start breaking down the top week 15 matchups for this week. So really, today's show is going to be identifying each week and understanding, all right, how can we get through the fantasy playoffs? So we have identified some of the top matchups in fantasy football. So on my short list, I have Cincinnati Bengals, the Denver Broncos, the Texans. These are the defenses you want to target for tight ends. Then you got the Texans, the Rams, the Falcons, the Bucs, the Chargers, which tonight is Michael Mayer. Then you have the Detroit Lions and, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those are some of the best matchups, pretty much the top 10. It's actually 9 teams that really stood out to me for matchups. So when you're looking at that, a lot of studs have great matchups, Hawkinson, Laporta. But then you got Chiga Kongu going up against the Houston Texans, Logan Thomas against the Rams, Hayden Hurst. I'm not sure what his deal, if he's going to be back in time. Sounds like he's probably not going to be back against Atlanta. A player that I really like is Tucker Kraft, starting to emerge. Luke Musgrave is out. He's got Tampa Bay. And then you got guys like Isaiah Likely as well against Jacksonville. So, Ben, quick thoughts about your tight end streamer this week. Who are you targeting for week 15? And is there anybody you're kind of concerned about this week? You're on mute.
My bad. My dog was running around barking. So Dallas Goedert, concern again this week. I'm not so sure that I'd be willing to start him, but I'm also concerned about a few of those other guys, just the amount of volume they're going to get. Guys like Logan Thomas and Tucker Kraft, I like them, but I wouldn't start them ahead of any of your studs. And I wouldn't even start them ahead of guys like Cole Kmet and Taysom Hill, who aren't every week starters, but you at least have to feel like in this matchup, they still sit above those guys. I feel like it's going to be really interesting to see how Dalton Schultz comes back in as well and whether Kyle Pitts can back it up again. So there are a couple of names that I prefer a little bit over those guys.
Yeah. And now, Jeff, any thoughts for you on this one? Who's your target for streamers this week in week 15? And is there anybody that really stands out that worries you?
One guy I really like is Isaiah Likely against the Jags. And Njoku had a field day against the defense. If secondary's banged up again, that could be a high-scoring game. So I think Likely will keep his target share from Lamar Jackson. I don't know. Is Waller coming back or not? Because if so, he's a name.
He's been designated to return this week, but he's not active yet, but he was designated to return.
He's a guy, if you've been stashing him, maybe, I don't know, the Saints or give up the fifth most points. So those are two guys I like. One name I am concerned about, but you can't bench him, is just Kelsey. I think the Chiefs are going to struggle. And New England this week, they haven't given up 300 yards passing in 2 games. And after that debacle on Sunday, I'm not sure where the head is at for the Chiefs right now. So I'm kind of worried about Kelsey, honestly. But I know you can't bench him, though.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I'm curious because I do have the capacity to look up Travis Kelce, his history versus the New England Patriots. So just give me 1 second. Let's see if I can break the world record for finding this data. But that's a good question because I think, Bill Belichick's strategy is to take away your top option, right? And then now you're talking no Isaiah Pacheco. Okay, you don't sit him. All right, here's his numbers. So PPR, 23, 18, 10, 11, and 9. So, I mean, his floor is 9 points. So you're not going to sit him. That's like exactly what you would want out of a streamer. So I think we're good there. I think the fringe guys, like Trey McBride has San Francisco this week. Now, I know we've talked a little bit about Trey McBride becoming a must start, but San Francisco's on a warpath right now. Their defense is legit. It just seems like maybe that could be something like, I guess my question is Trey McBride or your top streamer, Ben, this week?
I've got Trey McBride top 5 this week. I feel like there's so many targets there because their wide receivers are so banged up. There's no one that they can really trust. Marquise Brown is still dealing with an injury, couldn't get through the last game. Michael Wilson's only just coming back. They don't really have much else there, and they don't have any really good receiving running backs. So for me, Trey McBride is the number one option in that offense. I feel like especially in PPR, you have to start him over pretty much anybody.
Yeah, I guess my question now to Jeff is, like, Cole Kmet has Cleveland this week. Now, Cleveland, I know, got smoked last week about Evan Ingram, but Ingram's not used like a traditional tight end. Does it worry you at all if you have Cole Kmet, and would you pivot if you had him?
I guess it would depend on your roster. I think Kmet could be a sneaky play. Ingram had a good game against Cleveland last week. I know the weather may not be good in that one, but don't. Who cares about the weather? We learned last week in that Rams game, you can't fall for weather being an impact. But I think Kmet may have a sneaky decent game. So I'd be inclined to start him. But because I think that the Cleveland defense is banged up right now, so I don't think they're as good as they have been. So I could see Kmet being started, being a streamer start this week.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's really it. I mean, those are the only 2 guys. Like Dalton Schultz might be someone that you kind of fade against Tennessee because he's coming back from injury. We're dealing with Davis Mills now. Maybe that's one of the top, because Schultz has been pretty solid all year, top 12 tight end. So is anybody starting Schultz this week, or are they pivoting?
I'd be willing to start him, but only over like desperation streamers like Pat Frymuth and people like that. I think the other name we should mention as well for Thursday Night Football is Gerald Everett. The reality is that without Keenan Allen, we might see more tight end play. Could help Everett or it could help Parham. We don't really know who, but we could see a lot more checkdowns to Everett.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to week 16. So week 16, we have a couple guys that really have good matchups going into this week. Let's break them down. So Pat Freiermuth has really got Cincinnati. If you have a shot at Freiermuth, he's great. Hunter Henry against Denver. David Njoku has Houston. Juwan Johnson against the Rams. Of course, if you want to get real weird and you're in a deeper league, Will Malroy is the emerging young tight end against Atlanta. Evan Ingram, who's already been taken. Dalton Kincaid has the Chargers. TJ Hawkinson. And then, of course, we talked about Cade Otton, who's got the Jags this week. Some of the guys in week 16 that have really difficult matchups. Cole Kmet, Arizona's been pretty tough against tight ends this season. Isaiah Likely has San Francisco, who we just brought up. Really, Dallas Goedert has the Giants, who have emerged as a really tough tight end defense. And Dalton Schultz, once again, has Cleveland. So is there, Ben, over to you first on your streamers for week 16. Does any of those names really stand out? Do you have another name in mind? And is there anybody you're willing to sit that you normally start in week 16?
Yeah, I think this matchup is the situation where I'd be considering sitting Cole Kmet and maybe Isaiah Likely. I think we need to see how Likely goes next week just to get a really good idea of where he sits in this offense. But certainly Cole Kmet is someone that I think most weeks you're going to start, and you're not starting him this week. And I'd probably be inclined to want to sit Dallas Goedert if I can. Dalton Schultz I also wouldn't particularly touch. So that's 3 guys that you're probably going to want someone to stream ahead of them. The problem is there aren't any fantastic streamer options. A lot of those guys you should be starting anyway. The only name for me that really jumps out is probably Cade Otton, simply because he has that touchdown upside. And we've just got to see what's happening with that offense. But I'd be interested to see what happens with Otton in week 15, just to get an idea of how they're planning on using him as we come towards the end of the season. I wouldn't touch Hunter Henry. I know there's a temptation, but he's getting at most 3 targets a week, so he's very touchdown dependent. I also wouldn't touch Pat Freiermuth, and I know there's a temptation to do that as well. So really, you'd want to be starting one of those guys who's already on the cusp anyway, for the most part. It's kind of a situation where you've got 2 pseudo stud tight ends. Would you start one of them? Well, you're going to have to start one of them, and I'd probably drop Kmet out of those 2.
Yeah. And what about you, Jeff?
I kind of like Freiermuth in week 16 because the Bengals are allowing the most points to tight ends. They've allowed the most yards to tight ends. So, and defenses are averaging eight targets to the tight end spot against the Bengals, which I think is number 2 behind the Texans. So if you're attacking the Bengals, you're looking at your tight end. So I think Freiermuth with Trubisky may get some good target share. So I do like him in week 16. One name he may not be available in every league though, but I've noticed Taysom Hill has been dropping in a lot of leagues. The Saints have a good matchup against the Rams in week 16. So if you can grab him now looking ahead, I like that. I don't know the health of the receivers. I know Olave wasn't practicing. Shaheed wasn't practicing either this week still. So Taysom could be a sneaky little stash. I know it's hard to stash already looking a week ahead in your playoffs, but I do like Taysom.
I think, unfortunately, in week 16, the only 2 true streamers are Hunter Henry and Cade Otton. Like, if you're in a 12-team league, Freiermuth's probably taken. Teams that have been struggling for tight end are not going to leave a guy like that on waivers. But if you can get Freiermuth, he'd definitely be the guy I take. But I guess I know Hunter Henry, he just came off a 2-touchdown game. So he's had his moments against Denver. Is there any shot you guys would start him over a Dallas Goedert, who historically, actually, I looked this up, has struggled against the Giants? Ben, I know you're kind of against Dallas Goedert. Would you start Henry or Otton over Goedert?
Austin, maybe. I wouldn't start Henry. He just doesn't have high enough route participations. The same issue I have with Freiermuth. Freiermuth's not running more than 25 routes a game. That's way too low. He had 1 big target share game, but other than that, he really needs a touchdown to pay off. It's the same with Hunter Henry. You're basically praying for a touchdown, and that's not an ideal situation to be in. I'd much rather a guy who may get you 50, 60 yards and 6 or 7 receptions. I think that's possible with someone like Goddard. And I also think it's possible with someone like Otton, simply because they don't have enough options. They're currently going to white, so we really do need to see what's happening in week 15. And I really love that Taysom Hill call. The only issue is they used Hill a lot more in games where they're leading. And against the Rams, I don't know that they're going to be leading. I prefer Hill this week. Next week, it's going to be interesting just to see where he's at.
Okay. All right, we got a couple questions here. I mean, it looks like they're not really questions. It's more statements. But Bruce Day joins the show. Bruce is asking, what time does this thing start? Well, let's start it, Bruce. All right? And that's what it's all about, man. Got some tight end for advice is where we're at. Yeah, so drop your questions. If you have some start-sit questions each week, we can get them at the end of the show. We also have Jamie, of course. Jamie knows that Ben's from the future. It's kind of weird. Ben, what's the lottery numbers for tonight, my friend? Tell me, because you're in the future right now.
I mean, we have a different lottery to yours, so it's not going to be the same as yours. Sorry.
All right, well, Google it. I don't know what to tell you, all right? Just get me more money. Anyway, Richard Sickles, by the way, who's one of our writers. Richard, what's going on, man? I've texted Richard to come on the show like 15 times. He just doesn't even answer. He just says, don't talk to me. He's a fancy writer. He doesn't want to be on the podcast. I get it, Richard. No big deal. All right, let's move on to championship week, because that's what it's really all about, because everybody who listens to the show and who's on the show right now is a champion in my book. So even if you don't make it there, just enjoy the advice. Anyway, so the matchups that really stand out, of course, if you have Travis Kelce, he's got Cincinnati. You have Gerald Everett, who we talked about a little bit earlier. He's got Denver. We'll see the Easton Stick situation, how that actually works out for fantasy football. Maybe Easton Stick is not as bad. Sometimes we overreact to these backups, and maybe Easton Stick is fine. Maybe he's just going to get the 220. There's going to be probably 200 to 225 in there, maybe. And there's some fantasy points, especially with Keenan Allen out, but Everett gets Denver. Then you got Chig Okonkwo again against Houston. Chig has really kind of been he's been a disappointment. Me and Ben were really high on him early on, and just hasn't really panned out. But I don't know. There's something. Maybe it's time. Maybe Chig's time. Maybe he can get it done for us in the playoffs. Darren Waller. I do love the call that Jeff made earlier because Darren Waller does get the Rams. He also has New Orleans as well. He has one of the best playoff schedules. Even Philly. Philly's a good defense, but the Eagles are going to put up points, and maybe Darren Waller. I mean, Tommy DeVito's throwing out cutlets out there, chicken parms to people. Of course, Darren Waller wants to eat with the boy. I mean, he's his future quarterback. Cole Kmet has Atlanta. Juwan Johnson, we talked a little bit about. Taysom Hill's probably the better call out here, but he's not a traditional tight end. It's like he's going to run. You're probably hoping he rushes for a touchdown. He's going to get you 6 or 7 carries. He's not going to get you, 5 catches for 50 yards. It's going to be more of an all-around game. So maybe if the injuries to Chris Olave linger, if, Rashid Shaheed doesn't return, maybe Juwan Johnson takes on a bigger role and you could use him as well. Adam Troutman gets the Chargers, but I don't think anybody's touching that. Jake Ferguson, and then Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst is a name to monitor because if he does come back and play, he has some really good matchups in the playoffs. Now, jumping over to the players that have tougher matchups in the Week 17, Dallas Goedert, Logan Thomas, Dalton Kincaid, Evan Ingram again, Tyler Higbee, Dalton Schultz, and Tyler Conklin. I mean, Dalton Schultz across the board. Especially with the injury this week to CJ Stroud, I just don't know if I am of any interest in Dalton Schultz. But, Ben, let's kick it over to you. Any streamer stand out for you for championship week? Or is there any player you're probably fading in the fantasy finals?
Yeah, there's a couple of big names there that I think are really interesting. I mean, we both love Chiggy Okonkwo. He's finally starting to get together as the season's going on. He was really helped last week that their rookie Josh Wiley was out, and it looks like, given he's not practicing, he's probably going to be out again. And that's really up to Okonkwo's route participation. He's getting involved a lot more on third downs and in situations in 11 personnel where they're occasionally running passing plays. And that's just generally helping him get more targets. So I do feel like of all the players we've talked about, he's the one that excites me both in Week 15 and in Week 17. I do really like that Darren Waller shout as well. I feel like by Week 17, you'd expect he's probably going to be healthy. That's a good matchup. And Cole Kmet's one that I talked about as someone that's nearly in every week starter. Even when he doesn't have the best matchup, he's someone you can consider. And against Atlanta's got an excellent run defense, and they've got a really good secondary, meaning the tight end is where you can really attack them. So I do like Cole Kmet in that area. If he's out there, I feel like he's the kind of player you should be picking up if you are streaming. I'm very wary of starting anyone from New Orleans. They're turning it into a big committee situation. Juwan Johnson just isn't running enough routes. He only ran 13 routes last week. That's absolutely nothing. He was out there for only a third of the snaps. I don't think you can trust Juwan Johnson. Likewise, I don't think you can trust Hayden Hurst because even before he was injured, he was already a committee with Tommy Tremble, and they're now getting Stephen Sullivan more involved there as well. So for me, it's Okonkwo, Kmet, and maybe Gerald Everett, depending on how things look with Keenan Allen's injury.
Yeah. Jeff, what's your thoughts here?
Week 17, I'm hoping by then you're not streaming a tight end, but if you had to, I think Kate Otten might be the best option just on, ownership percentage. I like Kmet. I like Chig. I think Chig for week 15 and 17 going against Houston, which is interesting. He has them both week 15 and 17. They're one of the worst defenses as a tight end, so he's probably up there for me as well. I think Trey McBride is going to have a big game against Philly on that one. I think Kyler is going to have to be balling because I know for the draft stock, all that's going to come into play for some of these guys. So I like McBride a lot in week 17.
Now the Chig thing is interesting because Kyle Phillips, like Ben brought up, we talked a little bit about is dealing with his injuries, but he ran 27 slot routes last week. So 27 of 32. And if you look at our slot versus wide metric, which I know is for wide receivers, but if you just look at the metric, the thing that's notable is that the Texans are a slot funnel defense. It means they allow more fantasy points to the slot in general. So they're protecting the boundaries a lot better than they are. So that's going to be Chig. You know, when you have DeAndre Hopkins, he's going to get his. Traylon Burks is probably, hopefully by then, getting his he only ran Traylon Burks. Breaks my heart. He had 1 yard receiving last week. Oh man, talking about bad calls. But yeah, that just to me is interesting because like if you are streaming a tight end right now, Chigga and Firemuth are probably the only two guys who are streamers that have pretty much a good schedule all 3 weeks. Like you could start those guys because of the matchup in every game. So honestly, I think this is the week. You pick up Chig. If you're starting him this week and he plays well, you probably have confidence to play him the next 2 weeks and especially in the championship week. But other than that, the only other guy that really kind of stands out to me a little bit is probably going to be Gerald Everett against Denver. I mean, the other problem is like Easton Stick. When I say it just seems like the upside is gone now. All the upside of the Chargers offense is gone with Justin Herbert gone. Like, yes, Easton Stick might be fine, but you just lose that oomph. And when you have Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer returning, Austin Eckler out of the backfield, it's like I just don't know if I want to play that game with Everett. So I think in week 17, you're probably in trouble. And I'll bring it up 14,000 times. I don't think Cole Kmet's available. I think he's probably taken in most leagues. Darren Waller, if you didn't have an IR spot in your league, he might have been dropped. So that's a guy definitely to look at if you can get him. But I'm going to go back to it again. It's going to be Hayden Hurst. And if you can look at that again, he's, the one thing that we've known from Bryce Young is he does not really push the boundaries too much. And maybe Hayden Hurst playing in the middle of the field could be an option too if you're looking for a deeper name. But all right, before we close out the show, I gave you guys a project. All right, I told you I am Bob. I am struggling with tight end, and I need to stream a tight end for the whole entire playoffs. I asked you guys to find me maybe one or two players that could get me the perfect fantasy schedule to get me through the playoffs. Ben, I'm going to throw it to you first. Who do you got for me? What would be the perfect fantasy football tight end schedule if you were to stream two tight ends?
So for me, look, I already talked about Chigga. I think he's a really interesting one. He's the one I'd go for. But if he's not available in your league or for some reason you just have a Chigga version, which some people out there have, it's a real condition, then I would possibly consider taking Gerald Everett and combining with Kate Otten and just seeing what sort of Frankenstein sponsor you can make out of this.
Ooh.
I think Everett's interesting this week. I think Otten's interesting next week. And maybe by week 17, well, frankly, you're probably knocked out if you're starting those two guys. But if you're still in there, then I feel like Everett becomes an option in week 17.
Nice. Jeff, what do you got for me, buddy? Give me some good vibes here.
By the
way, I took offense to your comment that in week 17, I hope you're not streaming. This is my fake scenario. I am streaming a tight end in week 17. So tell me what you got for me.
Similar sentiments to Ben with Chig. I do like, so if we're looking for all three, I think you could go Freiermuth for week 15, 16, and then get Kate Otten in 17.
Okay. I got to tell you, the one guy that really gets me interested is Tucker Kraft. I like him in week 15 and 17. He's got Minnesota in week 17 on top of his really good matchup in week 15. Week 16 is where things are going to get a little ugly, though, because that's the week where it's like, hey, maybe you could start Kate Otten. So my I like the zombie Frankenstein tight end. That should have been the name of the show, the zombie Frankenstein tight end show. I would say you're probably going to be looking at, and here's a guy that we haven't talked a lot about is Logan Thomas. If he's available, I like him in week 16. He's playing against the Giants, which is kind of the Jets. My apologies. Playing against the Jets in week 16, which is an average matchup. But if I could do Tucker Kraft and Logan Thomas kind of emerge, I think that would get me through the playoffs. Logan Thomas is one of those things where that's another team that's like Russian roulette. You don't know which guy Sam Howell's throwing to that week. But I think when it's the Jets, it's not going to be the outside receivers for the most part. So you're going to have to beat them in the middle of the field. That's Curtis Samuel. That's Logan Thomas. So I do like that as well. All right, folks, that's all we got for today. That was a really good must-have tight end streamer show. I appreciate you guys both jumping on. Before we close out the show, Ben, you go first. Promote whatever you got coming out this week, wherever people can find your content. Give us what's new, what's streaming, what's happening.
It's all happening. Look, You know, streamers are my thing. Streamers and Stashes article is already out on the website, so make sure you go check that out. Check us out on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down, where I'm setting out my rankings as we speak. You can also go to the website, ffdfantasyfootball.com, or hit us up on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O. Obviously, I'll be back on with Bobby tomorrow, and we'll be talking about wide receivers after hopefully a really fun Thursday night football. I don't have high hopes, though. I think this could be a bit of a grind. But, hey, if we go in with low expectations, then maybe we get lucky. You never know. Start your expectations low, and maybe they'll get exceeded.
The NFL thought the Giants-Packers game was going to be so bad that they booked a second game, and then that game became the better game. So the NFL doesn't even know. So why should we know? Let's go Raiders-Chargers. High-scoring affair. Can't wait. Jeff, tell the people where they can find your content and where they can find you everywhere on social media.
I have my Monday article takeaways on Razzball.com. I'm looking at all the games on Sunday, looking ahead to help you out for trends that I'm noticing and seeing. You can find me on Twitter at Jefferson__21. I look forward to talking with y'all online.
All right, man. Well, listen, thank you guys for joining once again. You can follow me as well as Bobby Lamarca. By the way, Razzball.com. Go check it out. You got these guys with their great articles. I'm throwing out some random stuff from time to time. We got our slot versus wide tool. We got premium projections from Rudy. Whatever you need. I mean, we literally got crazy stuff going on. We have, by the way, some fun articles going to be dropping over the next few weeks. Home road splits, indoor-outdoor splits. I'm excited I'm in the lab right now. Talk about Frankenstein. I'm Dr. Frankenstein back there. I'm super excited for all the great content. Go follow us. Yeah, stirring the cauldron. It's supposed to be Christmas time. I guess what's the guy, the anti-Christmas guy was Krampus. No, Krampus. Oh. Yeah, I don't know why this just went dark. All right, we're done. This is it, folks. Once again, thanks for joining. Go follow us, subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And by the way, after the video, we'll have must-have handcuffs, must-have quarterbacks on the stream. So click one of those videos. Keep watching us. We have great content on the channel. Thank you for joining. We are out of here, folks.